My brother let his son destroy my daughter's first car. He called it teaching her a lesson. 8 minutes later, his $74,000 Mercedes was scrap metal. My younger brother used a rock to smash the $16,800 Honda Civic I recently purchased for my daughter. The sound of broken glass, the scratched metal, and the image of my daughter standing in my parents' yard, crying her heart out. Everything is still fresh in my mind. Why would my brother do that? How did my family react when they saw that scene? Let's get into the story. Before we get into the details, let me express my heartfelt gratitude. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this story. Hello everyone. I am Michael, 47 years old. I'm a senior software engineer at a technology firm in Sacramento, California. The story I'm going to tell today took place 3 years ago, around Christmas. And even now, when I think about it, I get emotional. Perhaps it is anger that has cooled down with time. Perhaps it's sadness over a long broken family relationship. The date was December 23rd, Christmas Eve. As is customary, my family returned to my parents' home in Stockton for the annual Christmas celebration. My parents had invited approximately 18 people, which included close and distant relatives as well as a few close neighbors. My wife and I left Sacramento for Stockton around 3:30 p.m. My 17-year-old daughter Emily drove the 2019 Honda Civic behind our car. I had just bought her that car for nearly $16,800 3 months before, to ensure she had transportation to school. The car was neither fancy nor expensive, but it was Emily's first vehicle. She cherished it like a treasure. Every weekend Emily would carefully wash and maintain the vehicle. She even named it Silver after the shiny silver paint. Throughout the drive I would occasionally check the rearview mirror to see if Emily was keeping up. She drove cautiously, always maintaining a safe distance behind us. I was so proud to see my daughter drive so confidently. On the way there, my wife Rebecca discussed the gifts she had prepared for my parents. The atmosphere in the car was pleasant and cheerful. I had no idea that in just a few hours, my joy would be cruelly crushed. We got to my parents' house around 5:45 in the afternoon. I parked in front of the yard, and Emily had just parked her Honda Civic directly behind me. She exited with a smile and dashed into the house to greet Grandpa and Grandma. Mom was standing at the door at the time, and when she saw us, her face lit up. She hugged Emily tightly, her voice filled with love, and said, "Here's my granddaughter. I missed you so much. Are you doing well? How is school going?" Emily smiled brightly and answered Grandma excitedly, "I'm doing great. I just completed my semester exams. Grandma, you got really high grades." Dad exited the living room at the same time. He smiled and nodded to greet me before gently patting Emily's head. He was a serious man who rarely expressed emotion, but with Emily, he always made the most loving gestures. Going inside, I noticed that some relatives had already arrived. I noticed Aunt Susan, Mom's younger sister, chatting with Uncle Robert. A few neighbors were also present, sitting around the table as Mom prepared food. And then I saw my younger brother Jason. He was standing in the corner of the living room, holding a glass of wine and talking to his wife Megan. Tyler, Jason's 14-year-old son, was standing next to them, with bleached blonde hair and an arrogant expression on his face. When Jason noticed me, he just nodded briefly and returned to his conversation. Jason is 2 years younger than I am. He now owns a small electronics store in Modesto. His business isn't bad, but Jason is constantly bragging and comparing himself to others. The new Mercedes worth nearly $74,000 parked outside was the most obvious example of this. I had a bad feeling as soon as I saw Emily's Honda Civic parked next to Jason's Mercedes. Jason's eyes swept over Emily's car with disdain, while Tyler looked at it with strange interest. The Christmas dinner began at approximately 6:30 p.m. Mom had prepared a lavish feast featuring roasted turkey, mashed potatoes, Caesar salad, garlic bread, and a variety of other traditional dishes. The delicious smell of food filled the house, mingling with the guests' lively chatter and laughter. For the first hour or so, everything went smoothly. I sat next to my wife and talked with relatives I hadn't seen in a long time. Emily sat at a table with her younger cousins, talking about school and extracurricular activities. Tyler, Jason's son, kept looking over at Emily with a curious expression. That 14-year-old kid seemed very interested in the Honda Civic. He even got up and went out to the front porch several times, most likely to admire the car from a distance. Around 7:20 p.m., I was sitting in the living room with Uncle Robert discussing the real estate market when I heard a blood-curdling scream from the yard outside. Emily screamed. My heart felt like it had stopped beating in that moment. I jumped out of my chair and dashed for the front door. My wife Rebecca followed closely behind me. The other guests rushed outside to see what was going on. When I ran out to the yard, the scene in front of me made me freeze, as if someone had slapped me in the face. Emily's Honda Civic was completely smashed up. The windshield had shattered. The hood was dented with deep gouges. Both headlights were completely broken. The shiny silver paint was now covered in long scratches. My daughter Emily was standing next to the car, sobbing. Her entire body shook with fear and anger. Emily ran up to me, crying, her voice choking and broken. "Dad, Dad, my car. My car was smashed." When I saw my daughter crying, I ran over to Emily and hugged her tightly. She sobbed on my shoulder, her entire body shaking. Even though my blood was boiling, I tried to remain calm while asking my daughter, "Who did this? Tell me." Emily looked up at me, her eyes red with tears. She pointed to Jason and Tyler, who were standing a few meters away. Her voice was both angry and distressed. "Uncle Jason and Tyler wrecked my car. They smashed my car right in front of me, Dad." Hearing Emily's words, I let go of her, turned around, and charged at Jason with uncontrollable rage. As soon as I got close to Jason, I grabbed his collar and pulled him towards me. My face was only inches away from his, and I screamed with rage. "Why? Why did you do that? Are you crazy, Jason?" Jason was taken off guard by my actions. He tried to struggle, but I refused to let go. For a brief moment, his eyes were filled with panic, but he quickly regained his composure and pushed my hands away with a fake outrage. He kept yelling, "Let me go! What is wrong with you? Why are you touching me?" Relatives rushed in to break things up. Uncle Robert and a neighbor drew me away, while Aunt Susan helped Jason stand up straight again. The atmosphere was unbearably tense. In the midst of the chaos, my father stood out from the crowd. His expression was stern, and his sharp eyes swept over each person. He stood between Jason and I, his voice deep and authoritative. He inquired loudly, "What's going on here? Can someone explain this to me?" Jason spoke up first. He said in a false victim voice, pointing at Emily, "You should ask that Emily girl over there. She's being selfish with her family. She even insulted and challenged Tyler and I." Hearing Jason say that made me so angry that I wanted to rush over and punch him right away. But Uncle Robert was still holding my arms tight and not allowing me to move. I gritted my teeth and fired back at Jason. "You are lying. My daughter would never insult or challenge others." Emily was standing next to my wife when I noticed her. She cried and shook her head. Her voice choked with determination. "That is not what happened, Grandpa. I never insulted or challenged anybody. I simply refused to let Tyler borrow the car because he is only 14 years old and cannot legally drive." When Emily said that, Jason laughed mockingly. He turned to face my father, as if he were the victim, and said, "See, Dad, this girl is extremely spoiled and needs a lesson. She even dared to speak back to adults." Right after Jason finished speaking, my mother yelled, "Enough!" Everyone remained silent and turned to look at her. My mother is a small, gentle woman who rarely raises her voice. But when she spoke up, no one dared to argue. Then Mom turned to look at my father. Her voice was calm but firm. "Thomas, check the camera. Determine who is telling the truth and who is lying." Jason's face turned bright red the moment he heard Mom mention the camera. He turned and looked at Mom, his voice stuttering and shaky as he inquired, "Camera? Which camera? Didn't you say the camera had broken?" My mother looked at Jason, her eyes cold as ice. She nodded slowly and responded in a calm tone. "That's correct. It was broken, but I had it repaired a week ago." Jason stammered, his voice trembling, and asked, "Why? Why haven't you told me?" My mother crossed her arms, raised an eyebrow at Jason, and inquired directly, "Why should I tell you? Do you want to control me, or do you want me to tell you the color of my poop every time I use the restroom?" Mom's words caused the guests to laugh. Despite the tense situation, a few people attempted to cover their mouths, but laughter still escaped. Jason stood there like a statue, his face pale white, unable to say anything. Dad did not say anything else after receiving Mom's command. He launched the camera app and displayed the video from the security camera. Everyone remained silent and focused on the screen. The atmosphere was so tense that I could hear my own heartbeat. The video began playing. The image was clearly visible under the front porch light. In the video, Jason was standing in front of Emily's Honda Civic, his expression unreadable. Tyler walked around the car, touching everything from the door handles to the rearview mirrors. The child even opened the car door and sat in the driver's seat, both hands gripping the steering wheel with an excited expression on his face. Then Emily approached, her voice polite but firm. "Tyler, get out of the car. I do not like people sitting in my car without permission." Tyler did not bother listening. The kid turned to Emily and demanded, "Give me the keys. I'd like to drive around the block." When Emily heard Tyler's unreasonable request, she shook her head and said, "No way. You're only 14. You do not have a license. By law, you are not permitted to drive." At this point in the video, Jason approached. He gave Emily an annoyed look and said, "Emily, let Tyler borrow it. He knows how to drive. He will drive around the neighborhood." "Nothing dangerous." Emily stood firm despite Jason's request. She looked directly into Jason's eyes and said, "No, Uncle Jason. Tyler is not yet of legal driving age. I cannot lend it to him. I apologize, but the answer is still no." When Jason heard Emily's response, he took a step closer, his eyes cold and threatening. He spoke as if issuing an order, his voice dropping low and menacing. "Emily, I'm telling you one last time. Give Tyler the keys. If you don't blame me." Emily took a step back in response to Jason's threat, but she remained calm. She raised her head and replied, her voice clear. "Are you threatening me?" I said. "No means no. Whatever you say, I will not change my mind." Jason lunged at Emily with a fierce look after that statement, but she was faster, running around the corner to get away from the car. Jason yelled in rage, "You dare to run? Fine." After saying that, he looked around. Then his gaze fell on a large rock lying by the flower bed. He bent down, picked up the rock, and approached the car with a terrified expression. He raised the rock and smashed it hard against the windshield. The sound of breaking glass rang out sharply. Tyler also jumped in. The child yelled, ecstatically, "Smash it, Dad. Show her who is the boss." The kid smashed another rock into the car body, scratching the paint with twisted pleasure. Jason and Tyler, a father and son duo, worked together to destroy Emily's car while she stood in the corner of the yard, crying and screaming in despair. "Stop it. Please stop." Following that came the image of all of us arriving. After watching that video, the atmosphere was oppressively quiet. Everyone was shocked by what they had just seen. Jason and Tyler remained motionless, their faces pale as wax figures. Megan, Jason's wife, stood next to him, her expression panicked. She did not dare to look anyone in the eyes. I turned to look at Emily. My daughter was crying in my wife's arms, her entire body trembling from the painful memories that had just been relived. After watching the video, my wife Rebecca was the first to speak out. She pulled out her phone, her voice cold, and said, "I'm calling the police right now. This constitutes property destruction. It cannot be overlooked." My father raised his hand to signal everyone to stop. He turned to look at Rebecca, his voice calm but authoritative. "Rebecca, hold off on calling the cops. Let me handle it first." Rebecca looked at my father, then at me with doubtful eyes. I gave her a slight nod, signaling agreement. Even though I was furious, I wanted to see how Dad handled the situation. Rebecca reluctantly nodded and tucked her phone away. She stated firmly, "I agree, but I'm only waiting 25 minutes. If there is no satisfactory outcome, I will contact the police immediately." My father nodded, turned to face Jason and said slowly, "Jason, I'm only saying this once. You and Tyler are apologizing to Emily right now. Following that, you will pay $28,000 in damages." Jason was stunned when he heard that. His eyes widened and he stammered in an outraged tone. $28,000? What are you saying? That car would only cost around $4,200 to repair. Are you trying to take advantage of me? My father did not move at all. He asked Jason again, this time with a cold voice. "How about compensating for emotional harm? Do you think my granddaughter's psychological state would be unaffected by being threatened and seeing her car smashed in front of her? Do you think the repair money is sufficient?" Jason still refused to give in. He tried to regain his composure before saying, "Families should forgive each other. Why bother calculating every little detail for something so small?" After that statement, my father stared at Jason in silence for quite some time. In the face of Jason's excuses, his gaze remained unwavering. Then he nodded slowly, his voice unusually calm, and replied, "Fine." Nobody understood what Dad was going to do. Jason sighed with relief, thinking Dad had accepted his excuse. He turned to face Megan with a triumphant expression, as if he had just won a battle. But he was completely wrong. After saying that, my father turned and entered the house. Nobody knew what he was planning to do. As I watched his figure disappear behind the door, a strange feeling rose in my chest. Dad stepped out about 3 minutes later, holding a large sledgehammer that required both hands to lift. The hammer hung heavy in his grip, but his steps remained consistent. When they saw my father holding a hammer, all of the guests fell silent. Nobody dared to breathe loudly. Several people took an automatic step back. Dad walked slowly, his steps firm on the yard ground. His eyes were as sharp as knives. There was no trace of emotion on his face. He came to a halt in the middle of the yard and turned to face the relatives who were gathered there. Then he exclaimed, "Hold Jason, his wife, and Tyler for me. Do not let them run." After Dad finished speaking, Uncle Robert and several other men stepped forward to grab Jason, Megan and Tyler tightly. At that point, Jason began to panic. He struggled and yelled, "Dad, what are you going to do? Let me go. Everyone, let me go." But my father didn't bother answering. He walked straight toward Jason's new Mercedes, which he had purchased a few months ago for nearly $74,000, and boasted about it to all of his relatives. Standing in front of the Mercedes, my father raised the sledgehammer high. Then he swung down. The sound of metal clashing rang out loudly, piercing the quiet Christmas night air. The Mercedes hood was dented, leaving a deep crater. After Dad's action, Jason screamed like a wounded animal. "No, this is my car. Stop." "Dad, are you crazy?" Megan also shrieked, her voice shrill and piercing. "Please stop, Dad. The car costs $74,000. What are you doing now?" Tyler yelled, "Grandpa, don't smash the car anymore." But my father did not stop. He continued to swing the hammer with incredible strength. He smashed the car doors, the headlights, and everything else within reach. Each hammer blow was like a judgment on Jason's actions. On Christmas night, the sounds of metal breaking, glass shattering, and Jason screaming combined to create chaotic music. 8 minutes later, the luxurious Mercedes had transformed into an unrecognizable pile of scrap metal. Glass shattered, body dented, and headlights were destroyed. The $6,500 car had become a pile of junk. Jason nearly collapsed in the arms of his relatives. He screamed in a desperate and furious tone, "Dad, why did you do that? Why did you smash my car?" At that point, my father moved closer to Jason, his voice terrifyingly calm, each word like a nail hammered into his heart. "Family members should forgive each other. You said it yourself." Jason stood there trembling. He screamed, his voice filled with hatred. "Do you think you're done after that? I'll call the cops. You destroyed my property. My car cost 4 times more than that girl's. You'll need to pay." My father didn't appear worried at all. He smiled lightly, mockingly, and responded sarcastically, "Oh, why are you being so selfish and calculating with your own father? You just said that families should forgive each other. Why are you changing your tune so quickly?" Jason was speechless after that statement. He opened his mouth to speak but couldn't get anything out. My father continued to speak calmly. "Besides, I did not destroy your car. Who will testify to that?" Jason's eyes widened as he pointed at the guests standing around, his voice almost screaming. "Everyone witnessed it. You smashed my car in front of all 18 people here." After Jason finished speaking, my father turned to look at the relatives with thoughtful eyes. He asked calmly, "Did anyone see me smash the car?" Uncle Robert was the first to speak up, shaking his head in a fake innocent manner. "I did not see anything. I was looking elsewhere." Aunt Susan nodded in agreement, keeping her voice low. "I agree. I only saw Jason smash his own car. He must be experiencing a breakdown." The other guests spoke up one by one. Their voices rang out in succession. "I did not see anything. Mr. Thomas was standing still in one place. Jason was smashing his own car. He must be mentally ill." Jason turned pale at the betrayal of those around him. He turned to face Megan, his voice desperate. "Honey, you saw it. You testify for me." Megan stood there, trembling. She looked at her husband, then at her father-in-law, and finally at the relatives who were looking at her with warning eyes. Finally, she dropped her head and remained silent. At that point, my father moved closer to Jason, his voice low and each word like an axe blow. "Oh, and my camera also broke. What a coincidence." Jason stood motionless, his face as pale as paper. He knew he had lost everything. After things had settled down, my father approached Emily. Dad placed his hand on Emily's shoulder and spoke softly. "Emily, I'm sorry. I should have protected you better." Emily looked up at Grandpa. She shook her head and choked out, "It's not your fault, Grandpa. Thank you for standing up for me." My dad smiled and told Emily, "I'm going to buy you another car. $22,000. You can choose whatever car you want." We'll sell that old car to a used car lot for whatever price we can get. Deal? Emily's eyes widened with surprise. She looked at Grandpa, then at me as if requesting permission. I nodded at my daughter, indicating agreement. Emily hugged Grandpa tightly, her voice filled with joy and emotion. Thanks, Grandpa. Thank you very much. My father patted his granddaughter's head, his eyes gentle but filled with sadness. Jason witnessed the scene from a few meters away. He stammered and asked, Dad, how about my car? You're buying her a car while not compensating me for mine? My father turned to look at Jason. His voice hurt without sympathy as he replied, Fix it yourself. Jason couldn't believe what he'd just heard. He stammered, his voice filled with indignation. Dad, you are playing favorites. You're giving your granddaughter $22,000 while telling me to fix my own car. My father moved closer to Jason, standing face to face with him. He asked, Playing favorites? How? Emily is my granddaughter, so giving her money is the appropriate thing to do. As for you, you're just an outsider who happens to share my DNA. Jason stepped back, as if someone had punched him in the chest. His face had completely changed color. My father continued to speak in a cold voice. Emily, the moment you lied and refused to apologize or compensate, you stopped being my son. You ended our father-son relationship with your own hands. The atmosphere was oppressively silent. Everyone stood there. No one dared to say anything. Jason stood there trembling, his eyes red from rage and humiliation. He took a deep breath, regained his composure, and gritted his teeth at my father, his voice filled with threats. Okay, assuming that's what you want. Okay, I'll sue you for property destruction. My car was worth $74,000, 4 times more than the girl's. You will have to compensate for everything, including emotional distress. Do you think you can bully me? After Jason's words, my father looked at him and burst out laughing mockingly, his tone sarcastic. Why are you being so selfish and calculating with your own father? You just said that families should forgive each other. Why would you want to sue me now? Jason gritted his teeth and exclaimed, This is different. You destroyed my property. I have the right to be compensated. My father nodded slowly, his voice calm as if he were talking about the weather. Yes, go ahead and sue. But keep in mind that I also have the video of you and Tyler smashing Emily's car. Do you want me to share it on social media? Jason turned pale when he heard this. He stammered. You wouldn't dare. My dad immediately cut him off. His voice was cold as ice. Your customers will be pleased to see you threatening a 16-year-old child and smashing her car simply because she refused to let your son borrow it. Your customers will be very impressed. Jason stood there, as if he had been struck by lightning. His face was pale white, and his hands trembled. He knew if the video went viral, his reputation would be ruined. His electronics store would lose customers, and the career he had built over the years would collapse. Megan took a step closer to her husband. She grabbed Jason's arm and, in a panicked voice, whispered, Let's go, honey. Don't make this any bigger. Let us go home. Jason looked at his wife, then at my father, and finally at the relatives standing around with cold eyes. He realized he'd failed. With a hateful tone, he said, Fine, I'll never return to this house again. Consider that you do not have me as a son. We will end our relationship from now on. My father looked at Jason, his expression devoid of emotion. He nodded slowly and said in a cold tone, Good. I've been waiting for you to say that for a long time, but please don't come back here crying and begging later. This door is permanently closed to you. Jason gritted his teeth. He turned to me with hatred in his eyes, growling, Don't expect me to forgive you either, Michael. You and your daughter will pay for what happened today. I looked straight into Jason's eyes and said, I don't need your forgiveness, and if you dare to touch my daughter again, I will not just call the police. Jason opened his mouth to speak, but Megan had already pulled him away. She turned to call Tyler with an urgent tone. Tyler, follow me. We are leaving right now. Tyler hurriedly followed his parents. The kid didn't dare to look at anyone, his head hung low. Jason's family summoned a taxi and departed into the cold Christmas night. His smashed Mercedes lay there as a reminder of what had occurred. After Jason and his family left, the party's atmosphere gradually returned to normal. My mother walked over to Emily, hugged her granddaughter and whispered in her ear with love. My granddaughter is excellent. You did the correct thing. Do not be sad anymore. Emily nodded, hugged Grandma tightly, and spoke softly. Thanks, Grandma. A few seconds later, my father signaled to everyone to continue the party. He said calmly, "Okay, it's over now. Everyone continue eating and drinking. Today is the night of Christmas. Don't let unpleasant things spoil the party." Despite the tense atmosphere, people gradually returned to the party. Laughter and conversation resumed, albeit not with the same vigor. At that moment I approached Dad, placed my hand on his shoulder and said, "Thank you, Dad." My father looked at me, his eyes gentle but tinged with sadness. He sighed and admitted to me, "I failed in raising Jason. He became that way because of my mistakes. But I couldn't let him harm my granddaughter." I nodded. An indescribable emotion is rising in my heart. I realized how difficult a decision Dad had to make. Giving up your own child is never easy, no matter how bad the child is. 4 days after the Christmas party, my father drove a dark blue 2023 Honda Civic to my Sacramento home. Emily was sitting in the living room doing her homework when the doorbell rang. She dashed to open the door and froze when she noticed Grandpa standing there with the car keys. My father smiled at Emily and said, "Here's your new car. I promised, didn't I? Go take a look." Emily screamed with joy. She dashed to the yard and gazed at the new car with wide eyes. She turned back to hug Grandpa tightly, her voice choked from emotion. "Thank you, Grandfather. Thank you very much. I'll take very good care of it." My father patted his granddaughter's head, saying, "I know you will. You are a good kid. I am proud of you." After that, Dad came inside to join Rebecca and me for tea. He explained that Jason had sent people to tow away the wrecked Mercedes the day before. Dad sighed and spoke to me, his voice heavy with weariness. He didn't say anything to Mom or me. Just sent people to get the car and then left. "Your mother is depressed, but she realizes this was the right decision." I nodded and asked, "Do you regret it, Dad?" Dad remained silent for a long time. Then he slowly shook his head and said, "No, I do not regret protecting my granddaughter. My only regret is not raising Jason better when he was younger. If I had been stricter, he might not have turned out like this." I didn't know what to say, so I put my hand on Dad's shoulder for comfort. 3 years have passed since the fateful Christmas night. Jason has never returned to my parents' home. He kept his promise, or perhaps it was a threat that he would never return here again. Tyler, Jason's son, also does not visit his grandparents. The child is now 16, but he has never shown up for any family events. In fact, when my mother accidentally ran into Tyler at the supermarket a few months ago, she approached him to say hello. But the kid simply looked at her with cold eyes and said contemptuously, "You're not my grandmother. Do not claim to be." My mother stood there as if someone had slapped her across the face. Tyler turned his back and walked away, and she watched in silence. Her eyes were red, but she did not shed a single tear. When Mom told me about it, her voice was calm, but I could feel the deep pain in her heart. She sighed and told me, "I don't blame him. He is still a child, being raised in this manner by his parents. What does he know? I feel bad for him." I didn't know how to comfort Mom. I could only say, "Do not be sad, Mom. You still have Emily and me." Mom nodded and smiled at me, but I could tell she was hiding a pain that couldn't be healed. Looking back over the past 3 years, I've learned 5 important lessons. Lesson 1. Teach children to say no and respect their boundaries. Never allow family or societal pressure to force you or your children to act inappropriately. Lesson 2. Excessive spoiling produces spoiled children. Teach children that they cannot have everything they want, and that being told no is a normal part of life. Lesson 3. Never use the word family as an excuse to bully others. A true family is not one in which people can hurt each other without repercussions. Family love must be founded on mutual respect. Lesson 4. Actions speak louder than words. Sometimes you have to make difficult decisions to protect the people you care about. The final lesson is that the consequences of bad actions will follow you throughout your life. You cannot turn back time, so think carefully before acting. My family's current situation is relatively peaceful. Emily is now 19 and preparing for college. She still drives the Honda Civic that Grandpa gave her, and every time she mentions it, she remembers him with gratitude. My parents still live in the house in Stockton. They're still healthy, though I can see sadness in their eyes when someone accidentally mentions Jason. Jason is still in Modesto, running his electronics store. We no longer communicate and are unlikely to do so in the future. Despite the fact that many people supported us, some continued to criticize my family. They claimed Emily was too selfish, which caused the family drama. They said my father played favorites with Emily.